I had exactly 4 minutes to get out the door, or I would miss the 7:42 and be late to the most important presentation of my career. My name is Adeline Marsh. Addie, to everyone who actually knows me, and I am 36 years old. I am a senior financial analyst at a mid-sized commercial real estate firm in Chicago. I have spent the last 11 years building something out of nothing. And for 11 years, I believed that the man sleeping in the room behind me was doing the same thing beside me. His name is Colton. Colton Webb, 41 years old, regional sales director at a logistics company downtown. We had been married for 8 years. We had a mortgage, a joint savings account, a rescue dog named Biscuit, and what I genuinely believed was a real partnership. I grabbed my bag off the hook by the door. My travel mug was already full, my laptop was already in my tote. What I did not notice in the dark of the hallway at 7:38 in the morning was that I had picked up Colton's phone instead of mine. They were both in the same black case, both face down on the charger strip next to the door. I did not realize it until I was already through the turnstile at the Clinton Street station, standing in the middle of the platform with cold November wind cutting through the gap in the doors, waiting for the blue line. I pulled the phone out to check the time. The screen lit up. It was not my lock Bis screen. My lock screen is a photo of Bis sleep with his chin on my knee. This screen was just the default gray, and the notifications sitting on it were not mine. I almost put it back in my bag and called Colton from the train to sort it out. That was my first instinct. Just a minor inconvenience, the kind of stupid thing that happens when two people live in the same small space and own identical cases for their phones. But then the screen lit up again before I could lock it. A text message from a contact saved as Gwen. Do not answer in front of A. I stood there on that platform, and I read those 6 words 3 times before the train came. Do not answer in front of A. I am the A. I did not text back. I did not call Colton. I boarded the train, sat in the window seat, and I stared out at the dark tunnel wall the whole way to the loop, and I felt something shift inside me. Very slow, very quiet, slow. The way ice shifts before it cracks. I gave the presentation. I do not know how, but I did. 40 minutes in front of the executive team, walking through a $28 million mixed-use acquisition in the West. Every slide. My voice did not shake. Nobody in that conference room would have guessed that I had spent the entire cab ride from the station pressing Colton's phone screen with my thumb, trying to get into it without his passcode. I did not get in. He had a 6-digit code I did not know. What I did have was that one notification, that one contact name, and the memory of every small thing over the past year that had suddenly, in the space of a morning commute, rearranged itself into a completely different picture. The late nights that started 8 months ago. Not many, just enough. The gym bag he started bringing home more often, though I noticed he never seemed to sweat through anything. The weekend in September, he told me, was a regional sales conference in Indianapolis. I had called his cell at 10 o'clock on Friday night to say goodnight, and he had answered on the first ring, which I had thought at the time was sweet. Now I thought, no. He answered fast because he wanted to control the call. I got back to my desk at 11:30. I sat down. I opened my laptop and I did not work. I went to Colton's company directory page and looked at his team. He had 4 direct reports. 3 men, 1 woman. Her name, according to the company page, was Gwendolyn Ferris, 29 years old, based on her LinkedIn. Account coordinator. In the photo, she was standing in front of a neutral background in a bright coral blazer, smiling the way people smile when they are told to look confident. I closed the tab. I did not spiral. That is the thing I want you to understand. I have a very particular relationship with data. I am trained, professionally, to look at incomplete information and not fill in the gaps with assumptions. I needed more before I was willing to let myself feel anything. So I made a plan. I texted Colton at noon and told him I had accidentally taken his phone and would bring it home tonight, and could he use his work phone in the meantime. He replied in under 2 minutes.
No worries, babe. Thanks for letting me know.
Good luck with the presentation. Normal. easy. The text of a man who had been briefly inconvenienced and had already moved on. I spent my lunch break on a bench outside my building with his phone in my hand. I tried every 6-digit combination I could think of. Our anniversary, his birthday, my birthday, Biscuit's birthday, which I knew because I am the one who always remembered it. His childhood address, the year he graduated. Nothing worked. What I could see without unlocking it were the notifications, and Colton, it turned out, was not a careful man with his notification settings. By 1 p.m., I had seen enough to know that Gwen was not just a contact saved with a warning. She was a daily conversation. The previews were short, just fragments, but they were enough. Can't wait to see you Thursday. Miss you tell her yet? Did you tell her yet? I put the phone in my bag, and I walked back inside and I sat at my desk and I did not cry. I did the rest of my afternoon. I reviewed 2 lease abstracts. I answered 17 emails. I ate the lunch I had packed because I was not going to let this take my appetite on top of everything else. At 5:15, I went to the restroom and called my older sister Vera Marsh, 40 years old, the only person in my life I trusted completely without condition. I told her what I had seen, all of it, start to finish. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "What do you need from me?" Not "are you sure?" Not "maybe it's nothing." Not "let's not jump to conclusions." Just, "What do you need?" I said, "I need to find out exactly what is happening before I say a single word to him, and I need to do it without him knowing." Vera said, "Okay, I'm coming over Saturday." I gave Colton his phone back that evening like nothing had happened. He kissed me on the cheek when I walked in the door and asked how the presentation went. And I told him it went well, and we made pasta and watched 40 minutes of a documentary about national parks and went to bed. He fell asleep in 11 minutes, I know because I counted. I lay next to him in the dark, and I thought about 8 years. I thought about the down payment we had scraped together for this condo, the 2 weeks we spent painting it ourselves because we could not afford to hire anyone, the night we sat on the bare floor, from eat takeout from paper bags because our furniture had not snapped yet, and we were laughing about something. I cannot even remember what, and I had thought, this is exactly where I am supposed to be. I thought about that version of him, and I made myself a promise. I was going to find out exactly what this was before I burned a single thing down. Vera arrived on Saturday morning with 2 coffees and the name of a private investigator she had found through a colleague who had used him during a custody dispute. His name was Jean Chu, and he was quiet and professional and did not make me feel like I was doing something dramatic. I met him on Monday evening at a coffee shop on North Milwaukee Avenue. I told him what I knew. I showed him the screenshot I had taken of Gwen's LinkedIn profile. I gave him Colton's license plate number and the rough schedule of his late nights. Raymond said, "Give me 2 weeks. In 11 days. I will not go through every photograph. But I will tell you what they documented." Colton and Gwendolyn Ferris had been meeting consistently since at least March, 8 months before I found his phone. They met at an extended stay hotel off I-90 in Rosemont, 12 minutes from O'Hare, on Thursday evenings and occasionally on weekday lunch hours. They had dinner together 6 times at restaurants in neighborhoods on the north side that Colton knew I rarely went to. In 3 of the photos, Gwendolyn was wearing a necklace I had never seen before. In one, they were in a parking lot and she had her hand on his face. Raymond also, without being asked, pulled a few public financial records. He did this, he told me, because in his experience, infidelity and financial concealment tended to travel together. He was right. There was a Chase savings account in Colton's name alone that I did not know existed. Did not know existed. It had been opened 14 months ago. Over the past year, Colton had been moving between $800 and $1. $200 per month out of our joint checking account in transfers labeled as autopay. A merchant name that looked generic enough that I had never flagged it in our bank app and routing it into that account. The balance at last inquiry was just over $19,000. $19,000 from our account. that we had built together, that I had deposited half of every paycheck into for 8 years. I sat at my kitchen table on a Wednesday night, after Colton had gone to bed, and I read through Raymond's full report twice. Then I made a list of everything I needed to do, in order, before this came to an end. The first thing I did was call our bank. I have my own individual savings account that I had maintained since before we were married. Not because I was suspicious, just because every financial advisor I had ever read said to keep one. I moved a significant portion of my individual savings into a new account at a different institution entirely, one that Colton had no knowledge of or access to. Then I contacted the joint checking account and added a flag that would require dual authorization for any transfer over $200. I did this online at 11 p.m. on a Thursday while Colton was asleep 12 feet away. Then I called a family law attorney. Her name was Patricia Goddard, and she was recommended to me by my firm's in-house counsel, who gave me her number without asking any questions. Patricia was 53 years old, and in our first meeting, she had the energy of someone who had heard everything and was not surprised by any of it. She told me what I could and could not do. She told me what I needed to document. She walked me through these concept of dissipation and of marital assets and what Colton's hidden account likely meant for our settlement. The money he moved, she said, was his Gazi Kipuk. That is marital property. All of it. The dissipation argument is strong here, especially with the duration. I asked her how long it would take. She said that depends on how complicated he tries to make it. I said he is going to try, she said. Then we'll be ready. The second thing I needed to understand was Gwendolyn Ferris. Not out of jealousy. Past a certain point, jealousy felt like a waste of the very limited bandwidth I had. What I needed to know was whether she knew about me. Whether this was something she was a willing participant in, fully informed, or whether Colton had built a parallel story for her, too. I found out through a mutual contact, a woman named Britta, who worked in marketing at Colton's company and had been friendly with me at 3 or 4 work events over the years. I did not call Britta directly. I reached her through Vera, who was careful, who mentioned she had heard through the grapevine that Colton and a colleague had been spending time together, and asked gently whether Britta knew anything. Britta called me directly 2 days later. She knew. She had known for 6 months. She told me that it was not a secret within a certain circle at Colton's office, that people had been careful not to bring it to me, because nobody wanted to be involved. She also told me something that Raymond's report had not. That Gwen knew Colton was married. That this had been explicitly discussed between them. That Gwen had, at some point, told at least one colleague. She believed Colton was going to leave his wife by the end of the year. By the end of the year. We were in November. I thanked Britta and I hung up and I stood at my kitchen counter for a long moment and I thought, he has a timeline, he has a plan, he is waiting for something. And then I thought about the $19,000. Quietly accumulating, month by month. He was building an exit fund, and he had not told me yet because he was not done taking. I need to tell you about Colton's brother, because he matters. His name is Reed Webb. Reed is 45 years old, and he is a mortgage broker who works out of an office in Naperville. Reed and Colton have always been close in the way that brothers can be close. Not emotionally, not honestly, but in the way of shared history and mutual convenience. Colton consulted Reed on our original mortgage. Reed had done us a favor then, and we had been grateful. What I found, after I asked Raymond to run one more check, quietly, carefully, was that Reed Webb's name appeared in a document I had never seen. A document filed 9 months ago with a lender in DuPage County. A pre-qualification letter for a condominium purchase in Wheaton, Illinois. The applicant on the pre-qualification letter was Colton. The property was a 2-bedroom condo listed at $387,000. The listed household income included a projection, not a guaranteed salary, a projection that was $40,000 higher than Colton's actual W-2 income. A projection that, if someone had helped prepare the documentation, would have required intimate mobiliary in a residential mortgage and worked in resident present application. Reed Webb was a mortgage broker. I sent all of it to Patricia Goddard on a Friday afternoon. I sent the pre-qualification letter, Raymond's full report, the bank records I had legally obtained access to as a joint account holder, and a timeline I had prepared myself. Because I am a financial analyst and I know how to build a timeline. Patricia called me back within 2 hours. She said, "Adeline, this is more than a..." I said, "I know." She said, "The income inflation on that application could be mortgage fraud. I'm going to refer this to a colleague who handles financial crimes. You should not approach Reed or Colton about any of this." I said, "I understand." She said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I am doing exactly what needs to be done." Here is what we did. Tricia and her colleague, a white-collar attorney named Douglas Ferris, no relation to Gwendolyn, I checked, spent 3 weeks coordinating with my documentation. During those 3 weeks, I went to work every day. I came home every night. I made dinner 4 times. I watched Colton sitting across from me at the table we had bought together, and I did not let myself feel the full weight of it. Because if I did, I was not going to be able to finish. I walked Biscuit every morning. I called my mother on Sundays. I met Vera for lunch twice, and she did not ask me to talk about feelings. She just sat with me and let me be wherever I was. At the end of those 3 weeks, Douglas had connected with the FBI field office in Chicago. The income misrepresentation on Colton's mortgage application, combined with Reed's documented involvement as the facilitating broker, was enough to open a preliminary inquiry. They wanted to build a complete picture before they moved. They asked me not to confront Colton or change anything in our household situation for a few more weeks. I agreed. I kept going. The morning it ended, I was the one who chose the location. Colton had a standing Saturday lunch with Reed, something they had done for years, a habit I had always found vaguely tedious, but had never questioned. They went to the same steakhouse in the West Loop every other Saturday. They always sat at the same table near the window. I had eaten there with them twice over the years. It was the kind of restaurant where the light was warm and the noise level was just low enough that you could hear every word at your own table. I arrived before either of them. I sat at a table across the room with Vera beside me, and Patricia Goddard's paralegal one table over, there as a formal witness. I had a single folder in my bag. I had Raymond's photographs. I had the bank statements. I had the pre-qualification document and the timeline I had built. Colton walked in at 12:07. Reed was with him. They were mid-conversation, laughing at something, and Colton had his coat over his arm and was already scanning for the hostess, and his eyes passed right over me without registering who I was for a full 2 seconds before they came back. He stopped walking. I stood up. I crossed the room and I stood in front of them both, and I did not raise my voice. I did not perform anything. I said, "Sit down, Colton, both of you." Colton said, "Addie, what are you?" I said, "Sit down." They sat. I put the folder on the table. I did not open it immediately. I looked at Colton the way you look at something you are seeing clearly for the first time after a long period of poor lighting. I said 8 months, the hotel in Rosemont, Thursday evenings, the account at Chase with just under $20,000 in it, the pre-qualification letter in Wheaton with the income you and Reed inflated together. The color left Colton's face starting from his jaw and moving upward. Reed said, "Addie, listen." I said, "I'm not talking to you, Reed. I'm talking to my husband." I opened the folder. I put the bank statement on top, the pre-qualification letter under it, Raymond's photographs on top of both. I did not need to say anything else. The table was quiet in the way of a room that has stopped breathing. Colton looked at the photographs for a long time. Then he looked at me and he said, "I was going to tell you." I said, "I know. By the end of the year, right?" He flinched. I said, "I've already spoken with an attorney. The dissipation claim on the marital assets is documented and filed. The pre-qualification application has been referred to the appropriate federal authorities. You should both have your own attorneys by Monday morning. I picked the folder back up. You can have the pasta pot. I'm keeping biscuit. I walked out of that restaurant with Vera beside me, and the last thing I heard before the door closed was the sound of Reed Webb pushing his chair back very quickly, the scrape of it against the floor, and asking for the check. Colton did hire an attorney, and the attorney was good, but Patricia was better, and the documentation was complete. Under Illinois law, the funds Colton had moved from our joint account into his private savings were classified as dissipation of marital assets, and the full $19,000 was credited to my share of the settlement. The condo we owned together was appraised and sold, and I received my legal half. The divorce was finalized 6 months after I walked out of that restaurant. Reed Webb lost his mortgage broker license in Illinois. The federal inquiry into the loan application resulted in a civil penalty and a requirement to repay fees associated with the fraudulent pre-qualification. He did not go to prison, but he did not escape without consequence, and the professional damage was permanent. Gwendolyn Ferris did not lose her job. She had not broken any law. But within 2 months of the story spreading through that office the way stories do, she had quietly moved on to a different company. I do not know where she went, and I did not spend time finding out. Here is what I want to tell you. If you are listening to this in your car or on your morning walk, or folding laundry in a quiet house, the month after the divorce was finalized, I found a 1-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Square, with tall windows and good light and floors that creak in one specific spot near the kitchen that I have come to love. I brought biscuit, and my books, and the pasta pot I had actually wanted to keep, and I left everything else. I got a promotion 4 months later. I am now the lead analyst on acquisitions, Gorman Fee Ms. West portfolio. It is the role I had been working toward for 3 years, and I received it because I earned it, and not one part of that had anything to do with Colton Webb. I called my mother on a Sunday in April from my new teen kitchen, sitting on the floor with my back against the cabinet and biscuit asleep across my feet, and she asked me how I was, and I said, genuinely, I am really okay. And I meant it in a way I had not expected to mean it so soon. I am 36 years old and I am starting over, and it is not the starting over I would have chosen. But I have learned something that I think is worth saying out loud. The most dangerous thing is not betrayal. Betrayal is loud, eventually. It announces itself. The most dangerous thing is the version of yourself that stays quiet and keeps the peace. It tells yourself that the small, uncomfortable things do not add up to anything. They add up. They always do. The difference is whether you are ready to look at the number. I was, and that made all the difference.